The United States has a long history of telling black people that they're not welcome. And during World War I, that message was delivered with extra clarity. In the early 1900s, flying was an extremely dangerous hobby. So dangerous that pilots didn't even have a word for surviving. At the time, there was no federal legislation banning discrimination in aviation, so individual states could make their own rules about who could get a license. And many states refused to grant licenses to black pilots or required them to pass more stringent tests than white pilots. The Wright brothers, for example, flew over 2,000 flights and lived to tell the tale only about half the time. For many of these men, flying for France was a way to escape not only racism, but also the limited opportunities available to them back home. While there was some debate over whether the first black American to join the Lafayette escadrille was Alfred Victor Clark or Arthur Wandel, both men became legendary during their time in France. Clark flew over 170 missions and shot down at least 13 German planes, while Wandel would go on to become one of the most successful American pilots of the entire war. But when it came to flying, black Americans were out of luck. He was even awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his service during World War I. In April 1917, the War Department announced that the Army was not going to train black pilots. They brought a sense of self-confidence and pride that they had not experienced in America. They soared through the skies and became some of the first triple aces in history. Their story is a reminder that sometimes we have to look outside our borders to see what we're capable of. They'd proven themselves as capable pilots, even earning the respect of the French public. Some even received medals from French President Georges Clemenceau himself, and at least 16 of them became what we would call triple aces today, meaning they personally shot down 3 planes, balloons, or other aircraft. And although this policy would later be reversed, that didn't help the men who had already been passed over. But despite the danger, black Americans were drawn to flying. And in 1910, Eugene Bullard became the first black pilot in the United States. This time, it was from their own country. Though the military officially lifted its ban on black pilots in 1920, it took another 20 years for the policy to be enforced. Even though there were plenty of black Americans who wanted to serve their country by becoming pilots, the U.S. military bluntly told them that they weren't allowed to fly planes. Bullard, who had survived 2 plane crashes and started his own flight school, eventually joined the French Foreign Legion. He served as a pilot in the Moroccan Air Service until he was 60 years old. So hundreds of black men did something that America wouldn't let them do. They took their talents elsewhere. They joined the French Air Service and became some of the first triple aces of the war. Over 200 black men showed up to the aviation section of the Signal Corps, only to be turned away with an official document stating that the Army didn't want their services. The story of how black Americans became legendary pilots in France begins well before World War I over the next decade. More black pilots earned their licenses, but they all faced constant discrimination. But things got even worse once America entered World War I in 1917. After the U.S. declared war, the newly formed U.S. military quickly set about training new recruits. As far as the military was concerned, black pilots were officially off the table. But that didn't stop them from trying to enlist anyway. So instead, they went to France. Between 1917 and 1918, hundreds of black Americans enlisted in the French Air Service, where they were trained and deployed as fighter pilots. And they proved to be quick studies. After serving with the French, he returned to the U.S. in 1919 and became one of the first men to join the newly created U.S. Air Service, where he continued to rack up impressive stats. In total, black American pilots shot down between 24 and 250 enemy aircraft during the war. When the war ended, most of these men returned to the United States, but they brought more than just stories with them. Upon their return to the U.S., several of these men attempted to join the newly created U.S. Air Service, but they faced discrimination once again. In the meantime, black veterans like Eugene Bullard continued to fly even if it meant leaving America. All these men had done what America wouldn't let them do. Thanks for watching. For more tales of daring adventure from history's greatest pilots, stay tuned.